Hello everyone, my name is Julia Adolfi and I am the team lead for this Capstone project where we create a security solution for a small business. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I am Julia Adolfi, the team lead, and I was in charge of the organization of the project, reviewing everything that needed to be submitted, initial tool research, penetration testing, and system monitoring. Alicia Anderson was our researcher in charge of risk assessment, the in-depth tool research, and phase 3 summary and suggestions. Mohammed Arslan was our technical expert in charge of the system setup, system hardening, vulnerability test, and defending the system. May Jabber was the researcher as well, in charge of information security policy, the passive penetration test, and also assisted with the in-depth tool research. And then Amin Salam was also our researcher in charge of the initial tool research. He helped with the vulnerability test and also the phase 3 summaries and the suggestions. So here is a quick project overview. Our project focuses on creating a practical cybersecurity solution for a small business. Our client is Aquaba, a restaurant that is Caribbean inspired with an online ordering website. So their site runs on WordPress, hosted on a Red Hat server. We started by assessing their infrastructure and identifying vulnerabilities and risks. Then we designed a layered security approach tailored to their environment. We applied real-world cybersecurity principles to make sure that the solution was realistic and effective. By the end of the project, we delivered a full security plan, documentation of all our findings, and recommendations to strengthen their defenses. So our main project objective was to create a realistic cybersecurity solution, as I mentioned before, for a small business with limited security in place. We focused on finding vulnerabilities, understanding the risk, and building defenses for the business that can actually be maintained. And we also took part in a cross-team testing exercise where teams used tools on each other's environments. That helped us validate our findings and improve the security controls we plan to implement. Overall, our goal was to deliver a clear, practical security plan that strengthens the network, improves access control, and then prepares the business for future threats. Okay, so these are the key concepts, or the concepts we use to guide our decisions in creating the security plan. And CIA Triad is on top of that list, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality being only those who are authorized to access can access the website or the server, and integrity being that things remain unchanged. And then availability is that things are accessible when needed. And we also focused on defense in depth to ensure that we weren't just focusing or just relying on a single control to protect the systems. And so we layered security controls and network endpoints. We identified access management, we encrypted, and we also had network security tools such as IDSs and IDPs. So IDS being intrusion detection, and then IDP being intrusion prevention. And so prevention would be the firewalls and the system hardening, and then IDS or detections would be the monitoring systems, which would detect any suspicious activity. So here we have the major project phases, where we had one, the first one being the planning and methodology, just moving forward, making sure that we had what we needed and knew what we were supposed to do moving forward. And then we had the phase 1, which was security program and development. Phase 2 being the security program implementation and exploitation planning. Phase 3, vulnerability, exploitation, and security operations. And then the final phase of here we would have is the project reflection and the final summary. So our overall project methodology was to assess the environment of Aquaba and then identify risk and build a realistic security solution for that. We followed structured phases um, and stayed organized with each part and built the project on the previous one. And our plan included research, hands-on configuration, documentations, and our key milestones would be initial assessment. And so having the initial assessment, completing the system hardening, documenting findings, and preparing the final security plan. And each milestone helped us track the progress and stay coordinated as a team. And we also had internal deadlines and screenshots and reports and representation to keep track of. So here is our Gantt chart right here, which was used to keep us on task and on schedule for deadlines. And each task was just based on the phases. So here we had the planning phase, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, just to keep us on track and to focus on what we had due and submit them. We also logged the amount of hours we put into the assessment or the project, and approximately together as a team, we spent about 95 hours on this. And this is, like an approximation of a number. And then we just kind of put the deadlines on top so we knew what we had to submit and what each person's part was.
Some of the tools our group used for the vulnerability assessment are Nmap, OpenVAS, WPScan, and Burp Suite. Nmap is used to identify vulnerabilities such as open ports, active hosts, and running services that could be exploited. It uses these discoveries to assess which systems need to conduct more in-depth testing. The way that this tool works is it sends packets into a system and then analyzes its responses. The strengths of using Nmap are being able to quickly scan large networks, identify software versions, and provide flexible scanning options. OpenVAS is used to detect outdated software, reconfigurations, vulnerabilities, and security issues across applications and systems. The way that this tool works is it implements automated security checks by administering vulnerability tests from its feed database. This could be done through comparing versions of software to known vulnerabilities of that version. It helps create risk scoring, generating reports, and matching vulnerabilities. The strengths of using the OpenVAS tool include being able to scan large databases, rank risks, and generate reports. WPScan is used to scan themes, configurations, vulnerabilities, and user exposure in WordPress installations. WordPress is especially vulnerable to attacks because it is so widely used, and those who use it do so through a third party, which presents additional vulnerabilities. It can detect exact versions and plugin vulnerabilities and provides an overview of what each is left vulnerable to. The strengths of using WPScan are that it works with theme vulnerabilities, large databases, and it can be integrated with other testing tools. Burp Suite is a tool used to test the security of a web application through analyzing the web traffic between a browser and the server. Its strengths include being customizable, making web traffic easier to interpret, and working quickly.
Aquaba Steakhouse's environment relies on a centralized server infrastructure that includes Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Apache, MariaDB, and a WordPress based e commerce platform. These systems support important business functions, including online ordering, employee management, and customer facing services across multiple locations. Because these systems are accessible through the internet and store business and customer related information, they face several cybersecurity risks. Some of the primary threats include web application attacks, stolen credentials, malware, unauthorized access, and denial of service attacks. The highest risk assets identified in this assessment are the WordPress e commerce website, administrative accounts, and employee accounts. The website represents the largest attack surface because it is publicly available and could be targeted through common web vulnerabilities. Administrative and employee accounts are also high risk because compromised credentials could allow attackers to access sensitive systems and data. A successful attack could result in financial losses, disruption to restaurant operations, exposure of sensitive information, and damage to customer trust. To reduce these risks, Aquaba should focus on implementing stronger authentication controls, maintaining regular patching and vulnerability assessments, monitoring systems for suspicious activity, and ensuring secure backups are available.
The purpose of our policy is to protect the interests of Aquaba Steakhouse across all its locations in Atlanta, Los Angeles, and New York City. The policy is tailored to protect the restaurant operations, customer information, payment transactions, employee records, and reservation systems. Our policy applies to all employees of Aquaba. Our first policy is for acceptable use and internet access. All devices that belong to Aquaba Steakhouse, such as tablets, computers, reservation systems, etc., are intended for business-related purposes only. Employees are prohibited from engaging in activity that is outside of the intended purposes, such as accessing irrelevant websites, connecting unauthorized devices to Aquaba's networks, using Aquaba's resources for personal interests, or downloading unauthorized software. Managers of Aquaba have the right to monitor systems for security purposes. Our second policy includes communications by email or other means. This policy requires employees to use emails that do not coincide with their personal emails. Employees are required to report any unauthorized means of communication. The only employees authorized to communicate for financial reasons, such as payroll and contracts, are the managers, accounting staff, and employees at headquarters. Our third policy is password and authentication. All employees are required to maintain secure access to all Aquaba systems through using strong login credentials. Employees must change their login credentials at least 3 times a year to keep the system secure and use multi-factor authentication. Any devices that are not in use or left unattended must be locked. Our fourth policy is prohibiting the use of personal devices unless they have authorization. Employees can access shift schedules from their personal devices but cannot conduct any other activity. Any devices that are lost or stolen must be reported. Our fifth policy is data handling and storage. Employees are responsible for the security of Aquaba's customers and company information, including payment transactions, payroll records, inventory reports, sale reports, customer reservations, and employee schedules. Employees are prohibited from saving or sharing Aquaba's company information with personal devices or unauthorized parties. Our sixth policy requires employees to protect their work areas and the equipment administered for their use at Aquaba. Any reports needing to be made must be made to managers who will respond to and document any security incidents. Our seventh policy explains how we implemented role-based action controls to secure our systems. Employees will be limited to accessing the necessary systems for their job responsibilities. Owners of Aquaba are the exception, and they will be able to access all systems. Each employee will have their own login credentials and are prohibited from sharing with others. Once individuals are no longer employed at Aquaba, their accounts will be disabled immediately. All employees working on a role-based control system protect Aquaba's data from personal leaks, misuse, and unauthorized actions, making the system and operations of the restaurant secure. Our last policy refers to the enforcement of the policy and the violations. All employees of Aquaba are required to comply with all policies outlined above, and a failure to comply with any will result in disciplinary action.
Hey everyone, this is Muhammad Arslan. I worked on the technical part of the project and mostly on the security assessment, upgrades, server setup, backups, server hardening, doing upgrades, things like that. And so we were in the phase 1 and we did a risk assessment and we discovered that if we didn't do any backups, that could cause significant issues. If one of us did like an error doing server upgrades or config changes, we wouldn't have a way to back up from there. So we received an email from the instructor that was saying that we can do a VM we can take a VM snapshot. And for that, we reached out to the IT service desk, and they took a one-time VM snapshot for us. In addition to that, we created a policy to mandate the backups for DB and WordPress, and we did weekly backups for these, and we basically put the website stack and the database into a we compressed them and we put them into a cloud environment. So that's what we did for the backups. And we maintained a changelog, and this was a precaution for tracing any errors that might occur from our changes. So we wanted to do this carefully, so we maintained the changelog for it.
All right, on to tool 1, Nmap. So this was one of the first digital tools we used for vulnerability analysis. We decided to use it because it worked well with the operating system of the VMware that we had. So purpose of this was to assess the security posture of the target VM server by identifying exposed services, software information, and potential vulnerabilities using Nmap. So with the execution and results of our findings, the publicly accessible Jetpack readme.txt file that revealed the Jetpack version that they had, which was 10.1, which exposed the plugin version information that could aid attackers in identifying known vulnerabilities. The Nmap identified the Open SSH 8.0, which is practically the port 22 that they had, along with Apache HTTP port 80, indicating that SSH is externally accessible and HTTP traffic may not be fully protected by HTTPS. So additionally, the server was fingerprinted as running Linux 3.0 x/4.x, providing additional reconnaissance information for the attacker. SSH supports public key, GSS API, and password authentication, while an unauthorized access banner is displaying as a legal warning. Additionally, SQL Map was unable to exploit the SQL injection vulnerabilities, suggesting that a web application may be a firewall, WAF, or intrusion prevention system, IPS, is effectively blocking the malicious requests. So with all those findings and with that being said, we had a few recommendations after the Nmap execution. And that was, first of all, restrict access to files that expose software version information. That's very important, and it's pivotal, and that was one of the first things we found out. Secondly is keep WordPress plugins, Apache, PHP, and the operating system up to date, because if they fall out of date, they get susceptible to risk of vulnerabilities and all of that. And of course, disable password-based SSH authentication. Use key-based authentication, right? Enable multi-factor authentication. That makes it much harder for the system to be compromised, MFA. And restrict SSH access to trusted IP addresses. And finally, enforce the HTTPS. Harden Apache by hiding version information and disabling unnecessary modules, right? And continuously monitor logs and perform regular vulnerability assessments. If you constantly do vulnerability assessments every single time, you keep the system up to date, you will reduce the risk, mitigate that risk as much as possible to keep your VMware as safe and secure as possible into the future. Thank you.
The tool I use to conduct my vulnerability assessment is called Burp Suite. The purpose of using the tool is to test the security of our targeted VM server and to check it for any vulnerabilities. The tests that I performed were mapping the website structure using sitemap, analyzing the HTTP requests and responses, testing SQL injections, testing XSS, examining the HTTP methods and security headers, and testing input validations. The results that I came across included there being no SQL injection vulnerabilities. XSS was successful at rejecting bad request responses. The invalid HTTP request was successfully blocked by the server. The security headers were present and configured, and the input validation did not produce a response. The one vulnerability that I did come across was the response header disclosing information that could be exploited by attackers. And that is the screenshot I have on the side. It's showing the Apache server and the WordPress version that is being used.
Metasploit framework was selected because it allows security professionals to verify whether discovered vulnerabilities are actually exploitable rather than simply identifying them. During testing, we performed HTTP service enumeration, directory enumeration, and HTTP options testing to assess the server's security posture. The testing confirmed that directory browsing was disabled and only safe HTTP methods were enabled, demonstrating good server hardening. We also identified two executable files located within the public web root, which represent a potential security risk because they could be accessed if permissions are misconfigured. Although exploitation attempts were unsuccessful due to a module configuration error, the testing still provided valuable insight into the server's attack surface and areas for improvement.
All right, tool 4, WP Scan. So the purpose behind this was to evaluate the security of the targeted WordPress website through WP Scan and an HTML source code analysis to discover exposed data and security weaknesses that can be exploited by attackers for reconnaissance. So we focused on targeting that VMware for the other team utilizing this tool for WP Scan. So the key results, key findings that we found was a website is exposing WordPress version 5.8.1 via the HTML generator meta tag, making it easy for the attackers to find vulnerabilities associated with this particular version. So that was noticed. From the HTML source code, attackers can get versions of JavaScript, CSS libraries, i.e. jQuery 3.60 or jQuery Migrate 3.3.2. You get the point. WordPress core files, information about the Apache server, and the WordPress REST API. So the WPS scan revealed an exposed XML RPC interface as well. That can be used to conduct a number of attacks, including brute force attacks, pingback attacks, and DDoS amplification attacks. Also the WordPress directory structure and internal resource paths were exposed, providing the fact of the use of the CMS and providing useful reconnaissance data. The website is available via HTTP protocol rather than HTTPS protocol, making web traffic vulnerable to intercept with the man-to-middle attacks. So these were among the key results that we found. So as a result, we collated all of that and developed recommendations. And of those recommendations was to upgrade WordPress, plugins, themes, and third-party libraries to newest versions. Also remove WordPress generator meta tag and disclose minimal server version information, so that cannot be seen by the tool. And also restrict XML RPC functionality and access the WordPress REST API. And then enable, of course, the HTTPS protocol with a valid TLS certificate. And lastly, continue the regular patching, secure file uploads, and perform ongoing vulnerability assessments and secure monitoring. So consistently do the vulnerability assessments, and that way you can have secure monitoring, notice how it was before, after, and all of that, and then compare and contrast. Thank you.
So during the phase 2, we did security analysis on our own web server and website. I did some browser-based testing. I tried basic SQL injection queries on basic search requests we had on the website. The WordPress version our website built on doesn't have a known SQL CVE. I checked so the version is 5.8.1, and I checked on the internet if there was any known SQL vulnerabilities for this version, but there wasn't any major issues. And so I just did some basic checks. There wasn't any SQL issues. and it would be impossible for me to discover a new CV for this. And however, I found that the admin username was used in the post. If you look at the figure 1, it says admin team 4, and this is showing that if some attacker discovered this, they would be able to do this would make their brute force attack way easier, because they don't need to try any usernames but just the passwords. And which the WordPress has a display name feature, and this hides the username. You can use any display name, and we used Aquaba Team, which is the restaurant's name, and its management team name. So that's what we did for this. We used the documentation provided by the instructor to launch the application. It wasn't hard work, the basic setup of the application, but the upgrades took some time. So we did analysis on the stock components versions to determine if they are vulnerable. We checked compatibility of the versions that we are going to upgrade to. So latest upgrades could cause compatibility issues with themes and plugins, as well as between the stack components. For example, some certain Apache version wouldn't be able to work with a different version of WordPress. And after the upgrades, we did a sanity check to ensure everything is working properly. And we did the upgrades, and you are seeing the original stack versions and current versions. We also did a minor upgrade on the Apache. The Apache version is not shown here because it was just a small change. The original versions that the stack came to us were deprecated, and the upgraded versions are still maintained by the developers. They don't have any known major security issues. We removed the password login from SSH. So these are the config and credential changes we did. We enabled the key-based login. We changed the credentials for Apache, WordPress username, email, password. Some features of the WordPress admin was not working. The admin UI was not working, so we had to do hard DB changes. We just used some queries to change the email, WordPress email username and password for the admin. We also did some DB login changes. We changed the WordPress admin DB username and password, and we also changed the root password of the MariaDB in case if somebody logged in to the server, they wouldn't be able to access to the MariaDB. And we also changed the Linux root passwords. We restricted some endpoints from the user using Apache HTTP's configs, and only enabled what they should have access to. We removed unnecessary services and closed unnecessary exposed ports. This is the starting of the phase 3, and at this phase we did vulnerability and exploitation analysis on the target machine. Also, we did security operations on our own machine. And these are some of the things I found on browser-based vulnerability analysis on the target's website. Figure 3 is showing HTML code including different IPs for source files. There is an IP that's different than the target's machine IP, target's website IP rather. This is probably caused by the instructor's earlier use of the stack. However, if this is not fixed, someone owning that IP may set up a malicious file into the source address, which can cause significant issues. And the below figure 4 is showing that WordPress version is visible from that HTML file. There are some other requests. They were also showing the WordPress version, but this is just one of them. And so that version that I just showed is 5.8.1, and you are seeing some of the vulnerabilities. This is just some of them, and that version is vulnerable. I checked some of the CVEs and I tried to replicate them on our own server, and these vulnerabilities are mostly related to plugins. If you don't have the plugin or theme that's related to them, it's still they are not available for exploitations. So overall, the target website was mostly secure. And here's another vulnerability we found. This is showing a plugin, Jetpack plugin of the WordPress, and it has the version of 10.1. And this version has a public CVE. I have the link included here for that CVE, and we recommend this version to be upgraded to the latest version.
So here we have the monitoring tools that we chose, which were System CTL and Journal CTL. And System CTL just shows that our server is active and running, and it just shows the date as well, since Tuesday, June 30th. And it also shows disconnecting, an error of someone being disconnected after trying to log in. Now, this monitoring screenshot was taken after the other team tried to penetrate or perform the vulnerability analysis on our server. And so with Journal CTL, the other monitoring tools, we see that KSU G5 tried to log in and was disconnected. Root was also disconnected, and so was admin, because we changed our system information. And so this log analysis just validates that our hardening and monitoring controls were effective. Now, the Journal CTL was more in depth, since it just kind of records each individual log or activity. And we set it to record the first 10 days or the last 10 days of activity.
And after doing analysis on the target machine, we started checking on our logs, our own logs, and enhancing our system security. There wasn't any unusual SSH login after checking the logs. Only our own root SSH root logins were there. However, if we look at the image, we are seeing that the Apache HTTP logs are showing our web server was scanned, and they used a vulnerability scanning tool called GoBuster. This is scanning, enumerating the endpoints to find exposed endpoints of our website. There were thousands of lines related to this tool, and I made a grep query, and these logs are showing the status code. So we are seeing 200 in the second line. After HTTP 1.1, it's saying 200 and 403, 403. And I just made it to not show any 400, 404 status codes, which is an expected status code from our side. However, as you can see, this showed some endpoints were exposed and need to be hidden from the user. And the first line is showing home/home/license. If you look at the second line after the get string, it says /home/license txt, and after HTTP 1.1 it says 200. So it was a successful HTTP response, and after that we are seeing 19,1983 bytes. So there was some content, heavy content, that was successfully returned to the client. So we took all these endpoints that were discovered here that weren't giving 404 or 403. Some of them are 403, which are expected also, and we blocked them from the user. And as you can see in the figure 5, this is the Apache HTTPD config, and we restricted all the unnecessary endpoints from the user. And figure 6 is showing after the changes the client is unable to access the home/license.txt endpoint. We had to do sanity tests and security tests after doing our changes, which would be conducted by a different security professional in a professional team environment, but we also had to do it on our own. So this was my last slide, and I want to thank my teammates Alicia, Emin, May, and especially to Juliet, and they were awesome to work with. And that was all from my side.
The overall recommendations we have for the target VM based on our testing focus on reducing the server's attack surface and improving long-term security. Priority should be given to updating WordPress, enforcing HTTPS, securing SSHS access, and removing unnecessary executable files from public directories. Continuous monitoring, regular patch management, and tested backup procedures will help the organization detect attacks early and recover quickly from ransomware, accidental data loss, or system failures.
So here we have the team collaboration, which shows how we work together, our communication methods, and the division of tasks. So just the main points of each. We work together by reviewing each progress twice a week, which I showed in the beginning with the Gantt chart. And we just kind of checked in and filled in along the way. And our communication methods were primarily through Teams, and we shared files through Teams to collaborate together. And then the division of tasks were simply just based on our individual strengths and roles. So here are our individual contributions. May created the information security policy and conducted hands-on penetration testing using Burp Suite. Mohammed performed server setups and hardening, upgrades, backups, vulnerability assessments, and penetration testing on the assigned servers. And he also implemented security enhancements to the assigned servers. Alicia created the risk assessment and conducted extensive research on the tools that were used and documented findings in phase 3, as well as provided overall recommendations for security improvements. Amin conducted vulnerability analysis or vulnerability assessment on the assigned VM or the subject's VM, and he also assisted in the research of the tools, including Nmap, WP Scan, OpenVAS, and he provided an extensive research on operating systems procedures. And I led the team by organizing meetings and managing deadlines while also filling in the gaps of whatever was not completed across all of the phases. I assisted also in the initial research and tools. I conducted monitoring of our virtual server before and after the penetration test, and also assisted in penetration testing using Metasploit, and coordinated our final submission. Okay, so putting together our individual challenges and solutions overall, we faced a variety of challenges ranging from the unfamiliarity with the tools that we use and the operating system compatibility issues, especially Metasploit, which um, required us to turn off our firewalls and antivirus protection since the system had restrictions. And so we overcame these through research, collaboration, and we shared troubleshooting and adapted our workflows. And we also interpreted findings together and dedicated our time on the tool mastery. So that was pretty much the bulk of where we spent our time, just kind of getting it onto our systems before we even began. So as a team, we relied on each other's strengths and we reinforced the parts where someone else was lacking and just kind of picked it up together. So, as a team, we agreed that with additional time, we would have expanded on our penetration testing and vulnerability assessments across our own and the other team's servers. And we would have improved our tool's effectiveness by getting more familiar with it. We would have also strengthened our research and implemented intrusion detection systems to refine the monitoring solutions and improve our documentation or the report as a whole. So, some of the knowledge and skills we gained as a team was hands-on experience with real-world cybersecurity tools and workflows. And we also did learn a lot from our vulnerability assessments and penetration testing and monitoring tools and system hardening. Just pretty much everything that we did in the project taught us something. And we also strengthened our collaboration and problem solving skills just by working together and just figuring things out. Here are some references. Thank you. And that concludes our project presentation.